Well, let's thank you for joining us this morning in Abuja studio, and welcome to Signature Morning. My name is Mwabuoz Njoku. Now, in the past two editions, we've been treating the matter of 2 years of the Tinubu administration. We intend to continue our conversation on it till tomorrow, Tuesday. Now, the reason for that is to touch all the sectors, all the activities of government that touch the Nigerian people. And today, we are going to look at 3 issues. First, we are going to look at rule of law under the Tinubu administration. We are going to look at defections, and then we're looking at the size of the Tinubu administration. Somebody has called in already to say, look, why don't you discuss security? Well, security has been discussed again and again. Maybe we'll bring it up subsequently. But for this morning, these are the 3 issues we'll be looking at in today's edition of the program. Tinubu 2 years on, and then we're looking at first, rule of law. My guest is a friend and the man who's passionate about public interests. He sacrifices his time, his energy to try to defend public interest. Madaki Ameh. Madaki, yeah, welcome to the program.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Now, I've watched in the past 3 or 4 days government activities and how people in government really have praised the president for doing very well. Let us begin using some barometer, some yardstick. And Madaki, I want to look at, as a lawyer, one of the things the Nigerian public held against the Buhari administration was cherry picking when it comes to what decisions of the court the government wants to obey. That also came up in matters of cases of corruption. Whom did the Buhari administration want to prosecute? Whom did it not want to prosecute? What decisions of the courts did he want to obey? And we said that that was threatening the entire concept and operation of democracy. Is there a fundamental shift in attitude under the Tinubu administration?
Well, thanks a lot, Chief Njoku. It's always a pleasure. There hasn't been any shift. I think rather than having a fundamental shift in more like ignoring the judiciary, I think we've had it even worse, under this administration. Speaking as a lawyer, I find that extremely frustrating because, these days, you don't really know, what's going on in the judiciary, and it's very, it's potentially damaging. The reason is that, from a position of resentment of the judiciary, people are getting to the point of ignoring the judiciary. And that's worse. The two, when people resent something, then you see some level of passion behind their resentment, and that's citizen activism. But when people ignore an institution, then it means, we are at a level that is frighteningly low. And that's where we are, that's also a call to anarchy, more like, because people are beginning to look for alternative ways of solving their problems so that they can just leave the judiciary alone. I saw a summons from the Okija Shrine, and I read it myself. It was posted. The Okija Shrine sent a summons to the party. They say, come and let's adjudicate your matter. So people are beginning to leave the institutions of governance, because the government itself ignores their rulings, and doesn't really care. There are many court judgments that have not been obeyed, all the way to the Supreme Court. Look at the Supreme Court, the landmark Supreme Court judgment that everybody hailed on local government autonomy, and disbursement of funds directly to local government. I understand, that up to now, the joint accounts are still happening. The governors are still seizing funds belonging to the local government, and nothing is happening. You get the point. And then there are situations that call to question, the efficacy of the judiciary to even do the basic and play the basic role that they are expected to constitutionally play. Look at the situation in River State. The illegality that's going on in River State at the moment. The president comes in completely ignoring every provision of the law. He imposes martial law, more like in the state. Kicks out a governor, an elected governor, somebody who was elected like him. You get the point. Kicks him out like a headmaster of a primary school will kick out a poorly dressed student. And then he says, don't come back until I say so. And then it is happening. And the man is sitting down meekly in his house waiting for when the headmaster will ask him to come back to work. And then, you file a case in court, everybody just, thumping their noses at you and say, let's even see when they will give you a date for hearing. These days to even get a date from the Supreme Court, to hear a case is a Herculean task. We have a full complement of the Supreme Court bench now. So why are they not hearing cases? Why are cases not being scheduled, for adjudication? So at the end of the day, the impact that makes is that, people have not only lost faith in the judiciary, people have also started ignoring the judiciary and going for alternative dispute resolution in courts, like the Okija Shrine, in other places, and that thing, it might appear laughable, but it's actually a very dire situation for the country.
Now, Madaki, let me just get some education from you.
Yes.
When we talk about rule of law, does it refer only to court judgments, or does it include regulations in institutions that ought to be followed? Let me give you an example. By the rules in, for instance, immigration, a person ought to retire at this time. In the police, a person ought to retire at this time. A permanent secretary ought to retire at this time. And the government ignores those provisions and goes ahead to determine when the person will retire or not retire. Does that infract rule of law?
Of course it does. The concept of rule of law is that where there is a law, there always ought to be a remedy. Ubi use, ibi remedium. Where there is law, there is a remedy. That's the fundamental principle behind the doctrine of the rule of law. And so, for that to happen, all the institutions of government, including the citizens, must obey the law as constituted. If people ignore the law and then do as they please, which is what we are doing now, that becomes the rule of man or the rule of force or impunity, more like, all-encompassing. So yes, and I'm glad you cited the example of retirement age. Every country has a retirement age, that is not based on the whims and caprices of the president. But in Nigeria now, when you retire, if you retire at all, depends on what the president
pleases the president.
Yes. So the president comes and says, okay, professors will retire at 70. Classroom teachers will retire at 65. Medical doctors will retire at 65. And then he says, judges retire now at 70 uniformly. But it creates a huge anomaly, and that's why one of the cases that the Public Interest Advocacy Network, which I convene, is taking to court imminently, is the issue of discriminatory retirement ages in the public service. A man is a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Justice. He retires at 60. His colleague, who was called to bar the same day with him, who probably is not as productive as he is, retires 10 years later. And in Nigeria, because he's a judge, because he chose, instead of going into the court civil service and following the process, and then retiring at PAMSEC, if he's lucky, or as director, he decides to be on the bench. And then he goes to that bench, and then he stays there till he's 70. That's 10 years after his called to bar mate had retired from the same public service in the same ministry as a PAMSEC. And in Nigeria, where retirement age is seen as a death sentence, because your terminal benefits will not be paid. In fact, the pensions are so meager. Do you know that a permanent secretary, in fact, a director in the ministry, who retires at grade of 17, his pension is about 140,000 naira a month. How? How does he pay children's school fees? How does he pay rent? Since he may not even own a house. You know, how does he survive on 150,000 or 140,000 naira in a month? And I'm saying this from personal experience because I have relations who have retired at that level. And, you know, before the 10th of the next month, they are already completely broke. And this is the age at which, you know, your systems begin to slow down. You need to go to the hospital more, you know, and all of that. And then you can't deal with, you know, basic things. What kind of country is this?
Let me push you, because I'm trying to understand, try to be educated, so that I don't just constrict this conversation, this very first leg, on court judgments only. Now, INEC elections are supposed to be programmed. Time for campaign, time for this, time for that, the date to cast the ballot. But go around the streets. The campaign has started. People have already emerged as sole candidates. Outside the timetable, outside the regulation, outside the law operating. And our president is in this instant, or looks like, if it is not right, you tell me, looks like he is the chief offender. What should I therefore be doing? Because our people say, if a father sends his son to go and steal, he does not enter the house stealthily. He breaks the door in the afternoon with impunity, with boldness.
It's happening. You know, honestly, I raise all the interesting issues. It's already happening on our streets, even with the traffic light. When people stop, when the traffic light is red and people come to the red traffic light, they look left and right. And when no vehicle is coming, you know, that might hit their vehicle, they just pass through. And I asked somebody the other day, I said, why is it like? I said, but the president doesn't obey the law. He does whatever he likes. So if the president behaves as he likes, you know, just like any brigand on the streets, why should he be the one obeying the law? So this is why rule of law is important. In a country where rule of law does not operate, and that people feel they can act as they like, you know, everything breaks down. From some of those small things, you know, that you can perceive as small, like, you know, not stopping for the red light, you know, to bigger things like stealing with impunity. And when they ask you, you say, hey, so what? After all, you get the point. Who is clean in this country? Start from the head, you know, to the toe, you know, through the apartments of this world and all other people. And then, you know, you now say, okay, come on now, this country is not being ruled by law. So why should I be the poor guy, you know, who is being, you know, traumatized? If you notice, I don't think police people stop people for infractions anymore along the road. And they can't, morally speaking. So if they stop you, you say, well, don't you have big men in your country, in the village where you come from? You see me, and you're asking me, where is my particulars for what? If I give you, can you read it? Are you literate enough to read, you know, the things that are, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of impunity going on, and you know, this is a degeneration of a people. You get the point? And it goes back to this very important topic of the rule of law, where the law does not rule. Because it's very simplistic, actually. Rule of law means let the law rule. So where the law does not rule, the entire fabric of society breaks down completely. And that's why it's also good for there to be a moral basis for governance. Where there is no morality attached to, you know, official positions, people just stomp their noses at their leaders and say, look at him, he's even president. Look at him, he's still a president. You get the point? What kind of country is this? How can this kind of people be in charge of the affairs of a country? Do you understand? And that's the psyche of the average Nigerian. Nobody looks up to governance anymore. Nobody. You know, you look at them and say, well, they're just working for themselves. You know, when they say they are borrowing money, you know they are going to share the money anyway. You are not going to see it, you know, in the improvement of your life. You know, when they say they are doing anything, they are budgeting, you know, the trillion that they claim to budget now, you say, hey, most of it is padded. They are going to share the money anyway. You know, and these things happen with impunity. Even when the media, with all the roadblocks against free media in the country, you know, when they go into investigative journalism and they bring out earth-shattering facts about the country, they publish it, nobody is interested in reading it. Because when you read it, you say, hey, so what? What's going to happen? You know, so and then because they understand the psyche of the average Nigerian, that we don't have staying power, they will now ignore us. And when they ignore us for a few weeks, you know, and the story keeps coming on, after some time, nobody is interested in reading it again. You see it on the headline of, you know, social media, you don't even comment about it because, you know, and so many things happening like that, just like, you know, casualties, you know, of terrorism. You hear 40 people killed in Benue. Okay. Just ordinary. You may not even read the story because you know 40 people in Benue as well, you know, it was 100 and something the other day, you know, and all of that. So human life is beginning to lose its meaning and its content. So, and then it happens, you don't even hear any form of comment from the president or any of his key officials. It is business as usual. Yes, they have been killed, so what?
Now, let us go back. We're still on this rule of law. When citizens become cynical, they don't even believe that this government, let me manage my life. It should rub off on the popularity, acceptability to be returned again on government. And therefore government should feel bad. Now, if the absence or the diminishing rule of law can get a government that kind of reaction from the citizenry, should government not show a sense of worry? I ask this question, Madaki, because when the citizen does not feel that law is of any use, when the citizen does not feel that his president is listening to him, his governors are listening to them, the ministers are listening to them, isn't it a terrible sign? Should government not look, it's not good enough, let's address it?
Well, in the same society, that's what ought to exist. And you know, I also like the earlier example about INEC, you know, the Electoral Act and the timeline for elections and campaigns and all of that. Of course, for over 1 year now, you know, the president's campaign billboards have been all over the country. You know, you have not even governed for up to midterm.
No, but you are the president, so you should know.
And you are campaigning already. You know, I see the billboards all over the place. Him and his wife. Maybe the wife is going to be the running mate this time. You get the point. Because I see that, you know, some picture of him and his wife dancing, you know, like ballet somewhere. You get the point. I think, what is the significance of this? You get the point. Well, you have the vice president. I thought he should be campaigning with his pictures also. But I don't know. I'm not saying anything, but
I didn't hear it.
It is what it is. Now, yes, there should be timelines. You know, when campaigns should start and stop, when this and that should happen. But everywhere billboards. But it's not about the billboards. Everybody, including the president, has that one vote. You get the point. Now, when a good, responsible government ought to gauge the feelings of the people. And that is why, you know, opinion polls are taken in civilized countries and taken seriously. You get the point. But here, nobody cares. You know, we do opinion poll and say the president has 2%, you know, approval rating. So what? What can you do about it? You know, the man is still president anyway. You know, and so, and also because they have this audacity to feel that, you know, they can win, they will be declared winners anyway. You know, whether they win on the ballot or not. They have a way of now beginning to ignore the institutions of state that are supposed to organize free and fair elections. So you hear of all the endorsements. I know we're going to talk about it. You know, you hear of endorsements and all that. But honestly, all those governors have no followers. They're just there. You know, the governor defects to another party, and then you think that all these people in that state have defected with him. For what? They're waiting for you. At least they'll cast out their own vote against you to say, oh, well, we don't support you. Because the governors don't do anything for them. All the governors are also there lining their own pockets, you know, and doing as they please. Then you think that the people so love their governor that because the governor has changed from whatever party he was in and then joined, you know, the ruling party at the center, that because of that everybody has moved to. And I find it extremely laughable when they do these things on television and they do it with a bold, free chest, talking about it as if they actually believe it. But I know deep down they know that all of this is just for the optics. You know, it's a joke. They will be taught a bitter lesson in this election that is coming. And they can't. What they ought to know is that they cannot rig this election. They can't. So we are waiting.
We're coming to that issue.
They can't rig it.
We're coming to that issue. I wanted to achieve something else before I ask you the question. If rule of law is not working, what does the government expect the citizen to do? Let me tell you why. Here, we are watching a local government chairman expressing frustration that his complaints to the appropriate authority are not listened to. Here in the studio. Here in the studio, a former local government chairman has been here to say, look, we are not getting the money. My colleagues are not getting the money that the Supreme Court has said is due us every month. We are not getting it. Here in this place, an opposition element has complained that when suits are filed, the government makes it impossible for papers to be served. If this is the template for government conduct, what does the government expect the citizen to do?
What else? You know, if you don't have any outlet to ventilate your grievances, then you resort to anarchy. And that again takes us to the Okija Shrine summons. You know, people genuinely, and I'm telling you this, you can investigate this. People are actually going for alternative discourse resolution. You know the point, they have left the court. You know, the time is going to come when the court will be completely empty. Nobody is filing suits anymore. But people are still living their lives on a daily basis. You know, Nigerians are very ingenious. They always find a way to survive. You know the point. I think that's why when the government ignores us and does absolutely nothing for the people with the annual budget,
they can survive.
They know that the Nigerians will survive anyway. And then government now begins to say, okay, but these people are not really showing as if anything is going on. No. Let's even make their life more difficult. Then they come up with so-called tax reforms. And say these people are not paying enough tax. You get the point? So let's try to take more from them, because I think if they're not comfortable, they should have been complaining. And then they come and say, okay, we're reforming the tax system, you know, we need to collect more money. And all that. Collect more money from what? The economy has shrunk. You know, the GDP of the country has drastically reduced from about $500 billion when, you know, Jonathan was, when it was last rebased, you know, under Jonathan's government, to about $199 billion now. That's a crash of more than 50%.
That's a crisis.
You know the point? It is a crisis. And this government carries on as if it's not a big deal. And then when the thing grows from the $199 billion to maybe 199.2, they say the economy has grown by so percent. You crash the economy by more than 50% in GDP, then you raise it by 0.1 or 0.3 and you celebrate. Or the exchange rate that you met at 460 on May 29th, 2023, when you took over, you know, crashes to 1,600 naira per the same dollar. And then when it now rises from 1,600 to 1,595, it becomes the naira has gained 5 naira. The naira has gained 5 naira, you know, against the dollar. Gained how? You get the point. So it is this, you know, orchestrated, deliberate falsehood, you know, that has been the bane of being a citizen of this country. And I can tell you it's very frustrating to just be an ordinary citizen whose voice means nothing. Because at the end of the day, when you complain, you're just like talking to the wall, to a concrete wall. And then they go and say, okay, then the A's have it, and the nays still continue to have it.
Before the A's and the nays have it in National Assembly without counting the number, just knowing who has it by audio, is the judiciary hamstrung? Let me tell you why. If the government, somebody outside now will say, after all, the judiciary is part of the government, but there's separation of powers. If judiciary is not getting its pronouncements obeyed, if decisions of the court at the highest level are not faithfully implemented, and if the rule of law is suffering this bashing, is there nothing the judiciary can do?
Well, I think the judiciary is genuinely hamstrung. I thought of it deeply, even yesterday. And, it's along the lines of the fact that by design, even constitutionally, the judiciary is the weakest link, in the art of governance. Because there is even, let it be a given that the electoral process is compromised and people don't have much faith in it. But members of the legislature are voted for directly by the people. Whether the votes are counted properly or not is another matter. But at least there's a semblance of democracy there because people actually have a say in the way they are appointed or elected. You get the point. Now, the executive positions too are elective offices. You have to go back and do the ritual of every 4 years, ask people whether, and from the results actually, a lot of people, incumbents, lose their seats and then they go away, you know what I mean? So it's not actually as bad as it's made to appear. But the judiciary, for some funny reason, is the only arm of government which, though should be independent, all their offices to patronage of the executive. So the governor appoints the judges at his sole discretion. He can put his wife there, he complains till tomorrow is a joke. It is what it is. Or his daughters, or his sons, you get the point, his cronies. So the kind of judiciary we have now is a judiciary that's already, an appendage of the executive because they got the appointment. Who pays the piper dictate the tune, right? And if you see the kind of quackery, the kind of lobbying that goes into appointing people judges these days, you look at the list of the judges, people like Professor Chidon Kalu, have talked about it ad infinitum. That the judiciary is now something else, because if you look at the list of any new set of judges being appointed, you must see names of prominent politicians' wives and cronies. These days, they even try to conceal some of the names so that it doesn't become too obvious to the public. But if you have a discerning, active civil society, they will probe and say, so this is the son of who, this is the daughter of who. And you see that honestly, the political elite has captured the judiciary, so that a time is going to come, I think that time is even upon us, when the judges are no longer able to give judgments against people who are holding the executive position because they owe their appointment and their sustenance in those positions to them. You get the point, either in the executive branch or in the legislative branch. And that is how judges get removed. But interestingly, just yesterday, Mexico was conducting an election for all their judicial positions, all. From magistrates all the way to the Supreme Court.
Conducting elections.
Yes, people have to go and vote to say, is this man or this woman suitable to be a judge? You know what I mean? And I think that, there is a lot of meaning in that. In America, there is some level of, elective offices, and all that, the attorney general, some positions, you have to vote for them, But Mexico took a decision under the former president, Obrador, to make all judicial positions elective, and they actually held the first of those elections yesterday. And I think that all these judges who feel so cozy and so comfortable because they feel that their jobs are secure and all of that will sit up if they know that they have to go and campaign to the people to vote for them. Why shouldn't we vote for our magistrates? Why shouldn't we vote for our high court judges? So it is that kind of thinking outside the box that makes sense. When they know that they have to contest the positions and they have to to compete among other equally qualified people who want to hold those positions, and the people then begin to take a decision and say, this man is a thief now. How can he become a judge? He will jail everybody, he will steal all the money, he will collect bribe. You know what I mean? Then they know that their jobs are not as sacred as they are perceived to be. So to answer your question, yes, the judiciary is currently hamstrung. Hamstrung by the fact that their appointments are not based on anything else apart from patronage. And as long as we continue this process where some imperial governor or an imperial president does the appointments on the lame advice of a judicial service commission, which is not even independent, you know what I mean? Why is it that it's only the judiciary that happens to here? You get the point? Or appointments like INEC chairman, why shouldn't we vote for the INEC chairman? Why should we wait for the president to put his brother as INEC chairman and then he tells him, okay, fine, this is how the results should be written. And he just does it because he was the one that appointed him. You get the point? So a lot of things are structurally wrong with this country. And unless we are ready to eyeball the problem and deal with it, we are going to be in a situation where on and on and on, we'll just be carrying our hands on our heads, looking at, governance as they have done it again. And it should not be they have done it again, it is that we are involved in that process. But now, we say...
But okay, there are many issues to converse on this morning. But if the judiciary is hamstrung, if the executive is impervious to public opinion, even in matters of rule of law, how will you categorize our democracy in the past 2 years?
Well, the past 2 years feels like 10 years. And I'm being very honest. You get the point. If you think back now, it looks like May 29, 2023 was such a long time ago. You get the point. Where the spelling of long is L-O, with about 10 O's before you put the N-G. You get the point. Well, they do midterm elections in America deliberately as a way of gauging the people's feelings about, how governance has gone the last 2 years. You get the point. Honestly, I don't know for other Nigeria, but I feel as if this Tinubu government have been there for 10 years. You get the point. And we are just doing 2 years, on May 29th of this year. So that's one of the ways of measuring, whether the people are connected to governance or not. Nigerians just want these people to go away. That's the truth. And I'm being honest. At least I'm speaking for myself, I'm speaking for my immediate, I'm engaging the opinions of people who I interact with. Everybody is fed up. The few people who keep prioritizing, and praising government are either tribalists who just want to keep the government there because their tribesman is the president. Or, maybe they're benefiting, but, you also see that there's no conviction in their, attempt to sell the government. You get the point?
Okay, Madaki, I'm going to abridge you because there'll be time for you to do the summary. Now, we have just finished rule of law. Take a good or take a bad? Just one simple answer.
Maybe like 10 bads. 10. I'm a lawyer, and I'm thinking of a lawyer who has been a lawyer for 36 years. These days, like I keep saying, I find myself embarrassed to introduce myself as a lawyer, so I choose not to identify as a herbalist. And I said this before on this program. I'm not
well, the first issue, rule of law, my guest says, for the past 2 years of Tinubu administration, he takes back
10 bads.
Yeah. 10 bads. Well, while I'm absorbing those bad takes, let me take a break and return shortly. And when we return, we'll be looking at defections and the threats of a one-party state. Stay with us. Well, we are still here. We've just ticked the first item, rule of law, bad. Welcome back as we discuss the second item. In how many months back now, the national conversation has been on the threat of the likelihood of a one-state Nigeria emerging under Tinubu. And why that? The horde of defectors, governors and entire cabinet defecting, even a former vice presidential candidate defecting, the entire National Assembly rising to sing, "On your mandate we stand," and the president telling them, all of you are re-elected. And some people say they can smell a rat. If Obasanjo attempted a third term, maybe Tinubu is attempting to collapse the entire country under one party. Madaki, did you have that foreboding that we're heading towards a one-party state?
No, not at all. Honestly, I don't share that fear. I've read about it in the media, copiously, but the fear is totally unfounded. The reason is that, yes, the rule of law is not operating here, You know, we can't claim to be country.
Just struck it down.
Now, and so ordinarily, you know, most of the African countries that eventually end up being one-party states, you know, start that way, you know. But one thing I know is that the Nigerian public is very, very aware and very conscious of what's going on. I think Nigerians are the most vibrant when it comes to discussing issues that happen in their country. You get the point? So when you see the trend of defections, you also, if you analyze it properly, you discover that most of those defections are completely staged. You know, either the people are bribed behind, you know, to come and defect, or they are defecting out of fear of probe. You know, there are many of them that defect, you know, and then because they have one EFCC problem hanging on their necks or the other. Usho Mole said it openly one time, you know, when he was chairman of APC, that if you have any problems, just join the party and then your sins are washed away. You get the point. I think you should actually have been a pastor. Maybe you should set up a church and be washing people's sins away. So, if political sins are washed away and you steal all the trillions, you know, like the former CBN governor who was alleged to abuse 750-something houses. For God's sake, what are you going to do with all those houses? But you never know. That story might never go beyond where it is right now. After some time, Nigerians will become tired of it. And when they see the news in the media, as usual, they say, we are tired of this now. Let something new happen. You know, nothing shocks the average Nigerian anymore. You know, but to go back to this issue of defections and the possibility of having a one-party state, it's never going to happen. There are core party men who will never leave their party, you know, for any other party. You know the point. And, you know, there's, you know, of course, we have three prominent parties. You know, hopefully the Labour Party will resolve their issues and then come into contention again. The only reason anybody ever mentioned the name of the Labour Party was because of Peter Obi. If Peter Obi had not joined the Labour Party, it would have been one of the many other parties that we don't even remember their names. You get the point. So nobody should ever denigrate the importance of Peter Obi in the scheme of political activity. It's not easy to come and contest for president in this country for the first time and then you win 6.3 million votes in an election where there was no transport money because all the naira was seized by Emefiele at the time. You know, so there was no transport. I couldn't vote in that election because I couldn't even go to my village. There was no cash to buy fuel. You know, your car, everywhere the fuel scarcity, the whole country was like almost, and the elections were held in that very complicated environment. The guy still got 6.3 million votes allocated, you know, even though if they could, I'm sure they would have denied him all the votes. You get the point. Now, and you know, if you look at the margins, you know, even in respect of those declared votes, you discover that the current president is actually a minority president. Because if you combine the votes of the other people, more Nigerians rejected him than those who accepted for him to be president. You know, with just 8.2 million votes or so, you know, by which he was said to have won. You get the point. Imagine, you know, if you combine Atiku votes and with Peter Obi votes, it's already more than 13 million votes. So whether you like it or not, you know, you vote for a joke, you know, compared to those who say we don't want you as president. You get the point. So that should mean something. And, you know, the foreboding at this portent for 2027 is that, quite frankly, from the way this country is going right now, nobody can say that we are better off now than we were, you know, 4 years ago or 8 years ago. You get the point. So anybody who didn't vote for Tinubu in 2023 will not vote for him now because he's doing well. And let's be blunt, that's the truth. No matter how much they want to deceive themselves, there are no new voters that will come into that put their votes in the ballot box for him. And then even those who voted for him, especially, you know, the northern voting bloc, who feel aggrieved, you know, that their interests have not been taken care of and that they have been ignored. I have heard that up to 4 million of those 8.2 million votes will disappear because they will not vote for him in 2027. So forget all these campaigns, forget all these defections by renegade, you know, governors who don't even have support. You know, you are governor and then you think you own the votes of our people, of the whole citizens of your state. Just because you moved from one party to another, everybody will move and follow you. Haven't you seen what's happening in Akwa Ibom State? Yes. Where one of the officials was saying, oh no, I'm not following you. And then in Delta, the other day I saw a video of where the former governor Okowa went to his community to explain to them why he had to move to APC, and the people were shouting at him. The women were booing him openly to say, "Oh, you are on your own. No, we are not leaving PDP." They have hardcore, party men who will not go anywhere, no matter the optics and the noise they are making, at campaign rallies. Let's just be blunt to ourselves. It's not going to be as easy as they think it will be. So, we will, go back to the questions, to the question you asked, how is it looking like in terms of a one-party state? A one-party state is totally impossible.
Yeah, but you know why I worry, Madaki. By the way, before I tell Madaki why I worry, very shortly, I'll throw the phone line open, because I did promise you from last week that we'll be making this program a little more interactive. I'll give you the number. I'll tell my producer to show you the number on the screen so that you can call into the program. Now, you know why I'm getting worried? You just mentioned Akwa Ibom. Delta is there. Go to the National Assembly and see the number of people defecting into APC. It looks like a flood is about to happen. And let me quote Ganduje, the chairman of APC. He said we should watch out. Many more. In fact, he was figure specific. He said we should watch out. 8 more governors will defect into PDP.
Into APC.
It's into APC. After that, some major stakeholders in the PDP began a proactive visit. They visited Mba of Enugu State. They have gone to look at the Akwa Ibom man. It tells me that Ganduje's statement was not an empty boast. And if that number defects to APC, that tells you clearly that a tsunami, a political tsunami, is about to happen, and driving everybody, only but a few, into APC. Is it not a clear indication that these defections are towards a movement to one-party APC, or effective weakening? And by the way, Madaki, have you seen that there's crisis in PDP that seems that they cannot be resolved? There's crisis in Labour Party that seems that it cannot be resolved. The coalition talks, as at this morning, they said SDP, which was a special purpose vehicle, or ADC, with the attempting to, both are not going to work. Their own statement. And then they say they might register a new party with fresh ideology, with a new structure that they can control. But INEC last week said it's not minded to register new political parties. Can't you read the writing on the wall?
Well, the writings may be there, Chifinjoku, but the point of it again is that, it all boils down to one vote. So don't worry, Nigerians are very sophisticated politically, these days. And politicians take the Nigerian electorate for granted only at their own direct peril. You get the point? That will put in my place that if you own the slave, you don't own his intestine.
No.
Then you can't give him food, he refuses to eat the food. What will you do? You get the point? So, you don't own the slave, the intestine of the slave. You get the point? So, the political gladiators will be blinded by how much money they think they are making. And they think that everything is our money. Well, people will collect our money because it belongs to them. You have actually pauperized them. So, if you increase the price of petrol from 197 naira, it was on 29th of May 2023, to 910 or 920 that it is now, in different places, in most places. And you have not increased salaries. You have not even implemented the 70,000 naira minimum wage that you promised almost a year ago. You get the point, and people are just looking at you. But you increase your own salaries. You know you have humongous budget. You know for practically all the government budget actually goes into financing government officials. Are you aware that the president's budget for feeding in his house last year alone was 9 billion naira? That's 24 million naira a day. What kind of food are you going to eat with 24 million naira on a daily basis? You got the point. Even if you are having a jamboree. And why should the citizens of this country feed the president? He should use his salary to buy food for a family, for God's sake. Every other place in the world, in America, in the UK, everywhere, the prime minister or the president brings out money from his salary to feed the family. Here, everything that the president eats is free. Everything he drinks is free. All his cars are free. Everything about his life is free. And we are a poor country. You know the point? So,
let me just digress a little bit away from this. You see what you want. Why? Tinubu had the credential of being a progressive and a Democrat, a near revolutionary. But he seems comfortable sitting in the old order. You just raised something now. I thought Tinubu was the kind of person that will come and revolutionize things. After all, his wife did say they have not come to the presidency to get money. Well, just maybe, my first caller is if my producer is displaying the number on the phone. Let me answer the first call. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, please. Who is speaking to us?
My name is Zakaria from Abuja.
Yeah, Zakaria, please make your contribution.
This issue of defection is a very nice topic, and I enjoy the conversation that you're having with your guest this morning. And this defection of a thing, we are having collation from different people from the Atiku camp and Peter Obi, and the APC are saying they are not trying to make Nigeria one-party system. But if you look at the coalition, from the look of things, it's like they don't have a focus yet, because the way they are working or the way they are doing their thing, it doesn't have any reason, or that they have the mind of Nigerians at hand. Because the way they are doing it is like they just want the best for themselves, but not for the Nigerian citizens. Look at it now. Nigerians are having a lot of serious challenges, insecurity, hunger in the land. The president just clocked 2 years in office, and still, Nigerians have not been enjoying the dividend of democracy that they voted for in 2023. So come 2027, I believe that the citizens should wake up and make sure that they vote for the best candidate, that to make sure that at least the citizens will enjoy at the end of the day.
Thank you very much, Odion from Abuja. Thank you. Madaki, his opening comment ticked off something in me. He said the coalition seemed directionless, without focus. His own word, it's not focused. Just before he called in, I was talking about crisis in Labour Party, crisis in PDP. Now this gentleman has raised the matter of confusion within the coalition. An AP chieftain did admit that APC was responsible. He said, we are responsible for the crisis in Labour Party and in PDP.
Yeah.
And he said openly that it is their business to make sure they don't get focused and get together. And that's the manner of politics. And now the coalition can succeed with SDP. As our own statement yesterday, can succeed with ADC, African Democratic Congress. Now they want to begin to float their own party, and INEC says it's not minded to registering new parties. Do you see this as part of the political mechanism to make the other parties fail and leave one understanding?
Well, politicking and the political process is a competition. It's just like you have the same product and the other people also have the same product that they're selling. Nigeria, all the manifestos of all the political parties
nearly the same thing.
We will give you roads, we'll give you houses, we'll provide schools.
What the hell?
Exactly. Well, this is the same thing we have been saying since before the independence. You get the point. So our politics has not evolved, you know, to that level of sophistication where people will discuss ideology, you know, and so on. You know, the ideology we have in this country is still the ideology of hunger, of, you know, the stomach infrastructure. You get the point. Where will my bread be better buttered? You know, if people win, who would like to give me an appointment? You know, those are the kind of cleavages that still drive our politics. You know, so I heard the caller, and I thank him for his views. But I think that the whole of the coalition process is still evolving. You know, but the earlier and the faster they are able to evolve, you know, with a nationalistic spirit, the better. You get the point, because there isn't all the time in the world. But if you go back to 2014, when APC was trying to come on board, you know, it was also the same story. You know, when you have strange bedfellows, you know, trying to lie on the same bed in order to achieve to birth a child, you know, it takes some time. You know, it takes some friction. So those frictions are also part of politics. We should just be patient with that process. And then don't also forget that there is a PDP, which still remains, I think, the most grounded
political party in this country.
It's not even about, even if APC does not compare with the PDP at all in terms of organization, in terms of the passion that the members have for their party.
Even structure.
Exactly, and then in terms of structure, you go to every village as the PDP ESCO, even at the village level. I went home the other day, you know, to Benue, in Adoka, where I come from. And then my partner in the office, Pohari Sobola SN, is the leader of politics in my district. You get the point. And so when he comes home, you know, everybody goes to gather with him, you know, and then we're exchanging we're drinking, you know, we're eating, we're talking about the challenges of the community and all of that. And if you see the passion with which people are talking about being in the PDP, whether, you know, come rain, come shine, you will discover that, you know, all of the optics at the national level that they're talking about is just a joke. The average voter in the village, the people who actually turn out to vote, their minds are not with the
all these movements
and all these things that they see on television and all of that. You know, so I think that the opposition will get it right. I believe, quite frankly, that whatever problems they have in PDP are clearly solvable. And now that they're planning the national convention, they've successfully held their zonal convention and put the leadership in place at those levels. So I think the problems that in PDP are actually, you know, more apparent than real. You know, deep down, the party has the mechanism to build up, you know, and solve their problems. You get the point? So I think that when the PDP does organize a hitch-free national convention, which they have put the committee in place right now, you know, under the chairmanship of Fintri, Governor Fintri of Adamawa State, you know, and aided by two other governors, I think, and then one other governor, you know, once they are able to get their act together, honestly, nobody will be able to withstand the PDP. And I'm not saying this because, you know, my sympathies lie with PDP. But I'm saying this from a very transparent, you know, and nationalistic, view. I think that PDP has realized their errors, you know, having lost power, you know, to this current contraption that's not taking us anywhere. And at the end of the day, you know, when they recalibrate and they come back, it might even be that the coalition will not happen because all the people who are aggrieved and want their own party might actually coalesce into the PDP. And then we'll have two strong parties, which is actually what we need in this country. And when we do that, honestly, before midday on election day, I can tell you that even before they start counting, you know,
you can announce
the election, we know that they have lost. And that's what I'm actually wishing.
Okay. Well, please, we're still looking at defections, and my position has been that it is like a gathering flood, but my guest Madaki says I should just calm down. This may be a breeze that won't turn to wind.
Exactly.
So I'm still putting the phone lines open. If my producer please can display the phone line once more, just call in. Do you think that these defections are healthy for our democracy under the Tinubu administration? And do you think that will have impact on what will happen in 2027. Don't forget, we're looking at Tinubu 2 years on. We have considered the rule of law, and my guest here says, forget about it. They didn't do well. And now we're looking at the defections. Do you think they will change the coloration of politics as the weeks go, as the months go, up to 2027? Just call in. And now, Madaki, I'm looking at the time too, so that we don't miss anything in this conversation. Tinubu, as a president, has 48 ministers. 48. The largest cabinet in the history of this country. He is creating new agencies. At least we know that there are 6 new agencies, development commissions. Has appointed people into the 6 geographical zones. He's appointed people into those commissions. He's made other appointments, so that if you look at the Tinubu government today, it is one of the most bloated. I do not think any government in Nigeria is as bloated as the Tinubu government. And just last week, a number of new appointments were announced. I think on the whole 20-something of them were announced. Tinubu, an accountant. Tinubu, a successful governor. Tinubu, a frugal governor who applied public resources, so it was the campaign said, into remaking of Lagos. All of us expected that if he came into power, he would then apply the theory of prudence, frugality. And that frugality will extend to the size of his government. First question for you. Is it right that the president has this bloated cabinet? Do you think it is serving any visible purpose that you are feeling?
Thank you. Yet again, this is a very interesting question. 48 ministers, of course, clearly the most bloated government we have ever had in the history of Nigeria. I remember when I was in primary school, one of the things they used to teach us was, governors, states and their governors, then ministries and ministers. You know the point. So if you now go and start teaching that kind of course in the primary school now, you just be traumatizing the children for nothing. Who is the minister of this? They will just be looking at you. I don't know. How come you don't know? Who is the minister of that? Minister of state, minister for state, minister, all over the place. So and then there are 48 names to cram, of ministers and their ministries. You get the point. So even for those of us who are, conscious of the public space, active on social media and all of that, it's almost impossible. There are some ministers, honestly, when they are reading news and they mention their name, I've never heard their name once. You get the point. The minister of whatever it is, sometime last week, when they said they were doing scorecard, there was a session where they were supposed to come and present what they have been doing and all of that. There are many of those ministers have not seen their face on television once. You get the point. And this is a country, where the ministers are supposed to be running ministries, are supposed to be delivering services.
Let me ask, have you ever seen the face of the new Minister of Science, Technology, Innovation? Do you know his name?
No, I don't know his name, but I saw, when I was coming for this program this morning, I put on the TV, it was one of the morning programs. You get the point. And he was saying something, the Minister of
Science,
Technology and Innovation or something like that.
Science, Technology and Innovation.
Exactly. I saw a face that I had never seen in my life.
Energy. I heard the name for the first time 2 days ago.
I knew I from the southeast, where you are from. So if you are hearing that name for the first time, and then what do you expect of me?
What I'm asking, what is he doing?
I don't know whether he's a new minister. Was he appointed with everybody else at the initial time when ministers were appointed?
Because if you cannot remember a minister, haven't heard of what he's doing, is that ministry functioning?
And we are talking of science and technology, which is a very important ministry. But not to pick on him. There are several of those kind of ministers. If you tell me now who is the minister, what's the name of the Minister of Agriculture, honestly, I don't know. But agriculture is about food. It's about the green economy of making sure that we eat at least once a day. These days nobody talks of eating 3 times a day anymore. You get the point. It's what you can eat, what you can scrape, and at least keep moving. So at the end of the day, quite frankly, when they come and then they are thumping their noses at us and telling us, that all the problems of Nigeria have been solved, they're dancing in public space like children. It amuses me because all this will not translate to votes. I'm telling you, the average Nigerian has already since made up their mind how they are going to vote. And they will vote with their feet, in a very brutal manner in 2027. And this election cannot be rigged. That is the point. I keep wanting to make this point. Nobody will be able to rig the 2027 election.
Because I told you that I'm going to give you just 1 minute to do your final word. Now, what I'm looking at this bloated government is, if the government is so bloated, and many people have accused the president of using critical positions as political patronage. He looks at those that give him trouble, constituency that he thinks is not doing well, he appoints somebody there. How does it help effective governance? How does it help the governance that you want to feed and want to experience?
Well, I was hoping that when, with all the hype around, Tinubu's coming into governance, that he was going to surround himself with smart people who will be able to make a step change, in the administration of this country collectively. Since we're talking of, collective responsibility, they hold Federal Executive Council meetings on a weekly basis. Yes. They're supposed to at least brainstorm and come up with something that is in the national interest. You get the point? But, these past 2 years has been a joke. We haven't seen any innovation from this government. They come up with all manner of ideas, and they announce it up front. I read one that was quite laughable yesterday, Federal government wants to use AI to identify poor people in Nigeria and target the intervention schemes, at such people using AI. This AI is a new concept in this country. We have not even used the analog process. You see poverty on the faces of everybody in this country. And you want to use AI to identify
because I want to tidy up this conversation. Honestly, what is likely to happen is that their systems will crash because AI will identify all of us as hungry.
Yeah, when you see the face of an average Nigerian who is not in a system office and not saying that this man is poor and hungry. You know, when there's hunger, when I go to my village, honestly, I can't sleep because everybody is hungry, everybody is tired, everybody is despondent. And then you come and say you're using AI. Maybe they start doing facial recognition.
Anyway, but at least, please, you are going to have the last word. You are going to last. Yes. We have ticked rule of law. We have ticked defection.
Yeah, defection is not going to help anybody.
Bloated government. There's no pass mark here in these 3 items we have conversed on. What's your last word on the last 2 years of the Tinubu administration?
Yeah, like I said, the last 2 years feels like the last 10 years, 10 long years actually, and I don't mean this. No pun is intended in this. I'm just being factual. When people, the days move faster. When you see governance impacting your life on a daily basis, you get the point. But when a government, is just dragging everybody back, and doing absolutely nothing for the people, then it becomes like a long period. Every day is like 3 weeks or 5 weeks. You get the point? And then you just keep grinding from one point to another. You know what I mean? And so I think Nigerians have gone through a horrible period, these past 2 years. There's nothing to cheer about. We hear about, NEL funds and that. But at the end of the day, in real currency terms, what can the average Nigerian buy with whatever money they are able to eke out right now? And the government is not supporting people to even create wealth in any way. The wealth is just being generated among the political class, where they share whatever money is available and they live large in an environment where everybody else is poor. Right. How do you govern like that? And then how do you sleep at night? When you go to bed in the night, then you actually have an honest sleep and wake up the next day and say we are going to work?
That's a question that I cannot answer. It's only a question that the president and his ministers and those in government can answer. Do you sleep? Are you happy? When, if you use AI, every face that we show will look hungry. Madaki, please let's not use AI so that the system doesn't crash. Well, that's the much we can take this Monday morning. We've been on for more than 1 hour. My guest, always a delight having him here, Madaki Ameh. He's a lawyer and public interest defender. And we're considering 3 items in the 2 years of the Tinubu administration: rule of law, defections, and bloated government. All the 3, my guest marked down. We hope by next time, at least some of them will pass when we are doing 1 year before the next election. Madaki, thank you very much for coming.
Always a pleasure. Okay.
My name remains Mwabos and Joko. Can we, if all things work out well, we'll be concluding this conversation on 2 years of Tinubu with a guest tomorrow who will be looking at those 2 years from the prism of weakest performance in the FCT. I hope all things work out, and we'll have you tomorrow. Can I say good morning and have a great day? Bye-bye.